A warmer friendly hello, welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, one of our good friends, Matt Josephs. You know him better as Mid Major Matt, does excellent work over there at FTN Bets, does some very solid work over there at ESPN Radio in Richmond. He is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about some of the teams that have impressed him / not impressed him thus far. A little bit of a lay of the land in the Atlantic 10. Some of the things that he has been noticing with some of the foul calls, pushing games over. We're going to be diving in a little bit on these home underdogs as well. And we're going to get a little bit of a look at a very small slate in college basketball today. We've only got 5 games in total, but certainly going to be breaking down Iowa and Iowa State and so much more. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on those 5 games as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at @GNet_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter as per usual. Please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I did get in one Twitter / X question today. It's all about trying to secure some closing line value. I know that I've been asked that a little bit from time to time, and the question is pretty much tricks of the trade that I use to be able to try to secure a line and try to be able to get the best of the number, and it very much is a situation by situation. Some games, they have a massive line move. Some games, like I did my DK Network write-up for the Penn State versus Maryland game, you had that total start at 141. It dipped down to like 137.5, and then it closes right around about 140.5 to 141, so it was all over the place. But I am a believer that in a lot of games, it's certainly not all games, typically the best numbers that you're going to get are going to be the first numbers. That's the way that it typically goes because these numbers, they move very quickly in college basketball. Now, there are times where I'm certainly going to wait. I don't take the opener on every single one of these games because if I'm like fading a blue blood, if I'm thinking that an underdog is being a little bit undervalued, they're like catching 23 points going up against insert your big time school here. Typically, we're going to see the money come in on insert your blue blood school here, and then you'll be waiting a little bit. And just the way that these teams have been bet in general, I feel like you're able to get a little bit more tendency with them. There are some teams that the books are very, very bullish on. There are other teams that they just get completely faded against. And I do think that that is very important to be noting as well. Like, for some reason, IUPUI openers have just been absolutely terrible this year. Like, IUPUI gets way too much respect on the opener, and then they get completely pile-driven down. And that's something to where if I'm going to be fading IUPUI, I'm going to do it early. And if I am actually going to back IUPUI, which has been few and far between the last few seasons, going to wait a little bit more. So just gauging a little bit of perception with regards to some of these teams, I think is very important, and it is a situation by situation basis, but I do think that a lot of times the first number that you get, it is going to be the best number. So hopefully that does answer your questions. And with regards to what we saw in college basketball late Tuesday and Wednesday, we got some nice results. I do have to do this a little bit in advance because of Greg Peterson experience. That is from midnight to 3 Eastern time, so do have to record these recaps more on 10 o'clock p.m. Pacific, but let's take a look back at what we've gotten in college basketball over the last 24 plus hours, try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Going back to Tuesday night, we did see some interesting results. Southern Utah actually really held in there against Utah, 88 to 86. Utah gets the win, but they were about a 23.5 point favorite. And for Southern Utah, they go 12 of 26 from 3-point range. They lose their turnover battle 13 to 10, which ultimately costed them. But you were able to get a very spirited performance out of these guys as Dominique Ford, Braden Housley were both able to chip in their 23 points. And then for Utah, you did have the Carlson brothers do a solid job, including Brandon Carlson, 15 points, 10 rebounds in this one. So Utah just barely able to escape by. You saw Grand Canyon with their just ruckus home crowd take out San Diego State by kind of 79 to 73. And Grand Canyon now 7-1, by the way. For San Diego State, they actually win the turnover battle 13 to 6, but they lose on the boards 40 to 32 as Gabe McLaughlin, 13 rebounds, 15 points, and then Rayshawn Harrison. He was able to put in their 23 points. It's not quite the same three-point shooting team for Grand Canyon as we've seen in past years, but I'm just wondering what we're going to be able to get moving forward out of the San Diego State backcourt, as they haven't turned the ball over a whole lot, but you can tell that they're just diminished without Matt Bradley this year. Jaden Ledee had 24 points, 10 rebounds, and guys around him really did not help him out. This was just pile driving. BYU just absolutely dump trucks Evansville by kind of 96 of 55 as they go 14 of 32 from three. I know that that's a team that mid-major Matt is going to be bringing up a little bit later, but that was impressive. And what else was pretty darn impressive was the fact that you saw Indiana go on the road and knock off Michigan 78 to 75. That's another result that comes in from Tuesday with Michigan. They go just 4 of 17 from three-point range. Doug McDaniel and Olivier Kamala, they combined for 31 points, but for Michigan, they play even up on the glass. They lose their turnover battle by 1, and for Indiana, Khalil Ware just continues to be all over the place for the team. 13 points, he had a block, he had 8 rebounds, and off the bench for Indiana, 4 separate guys put in there at least 6 points. I've continued to say it, you need guys like Peyton Sparks along with Anthony Walker to get a few more minutes for this team. I feel like they're better fits than Mackenzie Mbakbo along with Malik Renew. When these guys were out there on the floor, I felt like it was a different Indiana team, and they were able to get it done. So a little bit of cleanup from Tuesday. And then in terms of the Wednesday card, if you took my DK Network write-up of the under in Maryland versus Penn State, man, that was brutal. Maryland, with them up to the closing line in a lot of places, was 140 after 141. I laid it out a few minutes ago. It was at 141, goes down to 137, closes more around 140 after 141. Maryland stupidly fouls up 2 points with 4 seconds remaining on the inbounds to push it over. That sends our write-ups to 18 and 14 on the year, and we'll look to bounce back. And Maryland, they get the win. They don't get a cover as they were laying right around about 8.5 points, 81 to 75. The final as Maryland just continues to be so ice cold from three-point range, 5 of 25 from distance. But the way that they won this game, they absolutely plowed on the glass, 53 to 31. As Julian Reese, Dante Scott combined 25 rebounds. Reese was able to pump in there 24 points. Jameer Young, he had 28 points himself. You know, a little bit of help from your friends, but that was a very nice effort. And then you had 25 points out of Kane Cleary for Penn State. Penn State team that was able to win the turnover battle 16 to 12, but without Badley, they got absolutely obliterated on the glass. That was very costly for them. You saw Miami make a big giant statement against Long Island, 97 to 49 the final. Long Island got down 17 to 0 in this game, and they just did not stand a chance. If you took the over in this game, it's all because Long Island. They couldn't even approach 50 in this game as Miami did their part. They go 11 to 26 from three-point range. Wooga Poplar continues to shoot north of 55% from 3, 14 points, goes 2 of 3 from distance. Nigel Pack packs it in, 3 of 5 from distance. For Miami, they just controlled every facet of this game. They won the turnover battle. They won the rebound battle with no Chad O'Meara. 17 points, 13 rebounds. Very impressive showing there. And this was also impressive. How about Florida A&M going on the road, knocking off Presbyterian as the 7.5-point underdog by kind of 65 to 60. This despite the fact that for Florida A&M, they had a pretty long drought. I think that there was about a 7-minute time span from like the 14:45 mark of the second half until about 7 minutes remaining that they went scoreless. But you go 4 of 12 from three-point range. Presbyterian, 17 turnovers in this game, and you had 22 big points off the bench out of Love Bettis. So good on Florida A&M. It looks like they're rising up. While they are rising up, this Ohio team seems to be falling a little bit. They lose at home to Youngstown State by kind of 78 to 72. Very impressive showing from Youngstown State. They got off to a little bit of a rocky start to the season. They've now won 6 out of their last 7 games. And for Youngstown State, they lose the turnover battle 15 to 12, but they win the rebound battle 42 to 31. And this just doesn't look like an Ohio team that's clicking on all cylinders, especially from the outside. They go 7 to 21 from three-point range. They need a little bit more rebounding. Meanwhile, Youngstown State DJ Turn It Up Burns was able to give you 14 points, 11 rebounds, so they were able to get that one in. And then Fordham, right now they're looking like one of the biggest anchors in the Atlantic 10 once again. As an 18.5-point favorite, they were putting in some work, and well, they lost by a count of 80 to 77 to NJIT. Good win for NJIT, by the way, as they go 12 of 25 from three-point range for NJIT. They do let Abdul Sambilia very nearly get a triple-double. 18 points, 14 rebounds, 9 blocks for Fordham, but you did have 21 points out of Makai Gray for NJIT as well. For NJIT, they lose a turnover battle by kind of 13 to 11, but they go 12 of 25 from distance to be able to get that one in. Also being able to get this one in, How about Duquesne, 85-72? They have been quite impressive. Their lone 2 losses came on the road to Nebraska and in a nip-and-tuck 1-possession game against Princeton, a Princeton team that's really sinking good. And for Marshall, this is just not the same team that they were last year. They go 4 of 25 from 3-point range. Marshall wins the turnover battle. They play even up on the glass with Obiana Onchile Killian giving you 13 points, 12 rebounds, but you were able to have Jimmy Clark the third for this Duquesne team put in their 24 points. They've been able to do a relatively solid job of covering as well. And a team that has been quite hot in terms of making you money thus far this season is Oakland, but in a relative pick'em game, they do fall to Toledo by kind of 69-68, as this was just a little bit of a upchuck job from Oakland as they were leading at the half. Toledo, they then get up by, I believe it was 13 or 14 points with 12 minutes remaining, and then Toledo blows their lead, but Oakland in the end cannot pull it out as Toledo. They haven't been quite the same on offense this year as they have been in past years. They lose their turnover battle by kind of 15-14, but they were able to have 20 big points in this one out of Dante Maddox to really be able to lead the charge, so that was absolutely massive for them. If you are looking at your best cover teams in all of college basketball, a team that I was mentioning a little bit earlier, BYU, currently they are top dogs at 8-0 against the spread, but another team that has been able to do a relatively solid job against the spread has been the old South Carolina Gamecocks, and for the Gamecocks, they don't pull it out against Clemson, but now they're able to cover another spread. They go to now 7-1 against the spread. They lose to Clemson by kind of 72-67, interstate rivalry in which South Carolina was a little bit cold from 3. They go 10-30 from the outside, but Michi Johnson puts in their 26 points for Clemson. You had PJ Hall once again have a nice impact on this game, 14 points, 8 boards, 4 blocks. Even though he goes just 1 of 3 from 3-point range, was able to have his imprint on the game, but another nice effort from a South Carolina team that has really been a pleasant surprise this far this season. A team that has not been a pleasant surprise, that would be our good friends DePaul. I am doing this as their game against Texas A&M is in the second half, but currently they're down 34 points with about 15 minutes remaining in the game, so I think that we know how this one turned out for Texas A&M. Just a thorough pounding of DePaul. They started 12 of 20 from 3-point range, and now you've got Wade Taylor with 13 points, 5 assists in about 25 minutes, and for DePaul, they're right now trailing by 34 points despite the fact that they have went 4 of 10 from 3-point range. Once again, George Mikan is rolling over in his grave, and a team that's really been digging your grave, if you've been digging them on the spread, that'd be Vanderbilt. They fall to San Francisco by kind of 73-60 at home. San Francisco led this game darn near wire to wire. Marcus Williams, he was able to do a nice job throwing in their 18 points. For San Francisco, they do commit 15 turnovers to the 8 of Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt, I mean, talk about getting destroyed on glass. This is with Colin Smith returning to the fold, by the way. 39-21. Josh Mogbo, 14 rebounds, 9 assists, just 4 points, but he was able to have his fingerprints all over this game. They go 13 of 29 from 3-point range, and Vanderbilt, they have been an almighty mess this far this season. They have been one of your bottom teams in terms of covering in all of college basketball. Now, if you're looking at some of your worst teams right now, Southeast Missouri State, Grambling, Eastern Kentucky, we're going to be seeing on Thursday. These are all teams that have yet to cover, and Georgia Southern as well. Georgia Southern currently 0-8 against the spread. Vanderbilt not quite at that level, and Maryland, with their non-cover on Wednesday, they actually fell to 2-8 against the spread as well. But how about how bad Siena has been as well? I recognize that they've been without their main scorer, Michael Ealy, but they get completely dump trucked, 67-51 against a pretty good Bryant team. But for Siena, they now moved to 2-8 against the spread themselves, and has been really a rough go of it for them. And in terms of a little bit more of a good go of it, how about Minnesota entering into the night 7-1 against the spread, but against Nebraska, it's looking like that's going to come to an end. Currently, I'm doing this at the half, 39-24. Now, we have seen Minnesota already blow a 20-point lead in 10 minutes, so perhaps they were able to make that comeback. But Nebraska, after they got absolutely pounded by Creighton, they were able to make a statement in that first half, so that is something that you do like to see. And speaking of statements, the biggest statement of the night was made by Marquette, 86-65. They just completely dump trucked Texas, and quite frankly, the game wasn't even that close. For Marquette, they go 14 of 30 from 3-point range. Max Asmus, he was able to put in their 25 points, but for Marquette, 28 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists for one Mr. Tyler Kolek. Marquette loses the turnover battle, but they actually win the rebound battle 37-30. That's always your fear with this Marquette team, is that they're going to lose on the glass. They were certainly able to win that battle. Now, Colorado State, they entered into Wednesday 7-1 against the spread. They were laying a mondo number against Denver. They were laying about 21.5 points, and as I do this with about 14 minutes remaining, Denver up 1. So it looks like that carpet tail ride is going to be coming to a little bit of an end. Still a relatively solid Colorado State team, but we have just seen teams be very hot and cold thus far this season. But Houston, it always feels like they're able to cover these big spreads. They completely take down Rice by a count of 75-39 for Houston. They go 8 of 22 from three-point range. And the biggest question I had, how would they handle Max Fiedler, who's got all sorts of versatility? How about 6 points, 2 assists, and 6 turnovers for Max Fiedler? Rice had 21 turnovers, 13 made field goals. This Houston team looking like by far the best defense in all of college basketball as of right now. I know that Iowa State is going to have something to say about that on Thursday, but my goodness gracious, these guys have come out, and they have come out in force. And another game that just went final prior to myself doing this recording, Memphis in a nip-and-tuck game against VCU, a VCU team that has been all over the place. They get the job done by a count of 85-80. Memphis was laying 2.5 points on the road, and it was all about David Jones being able to help out this team with 23 big points, 8 rebounds, 4 steals. And for Memphis, they do turn the ball over 18 times in this game, but they're able to win the rebound battle. And for VCU, 7 of 29 from three-point range. My goodness gracious, this team really needs Cam Barisal back in full because it has not been great with him out, and that was a little bit of a less than savory performance. And also, speaking of less than savory performances, Boston U, congratulations to now being 2-7 against the spread. They fall to Maine at home by kind of 74-65. Maine was laying 2.5 points, and for Maine, they go 7 of 20 from three-point range. Boston U, despite going 7 of 18 from 3, they fall in this game because they lose the turnover battle 16-10. And for Boston U, even though they were able to win the rebound battle, this team loses each other top 5 scorers from a season ago. It has been rough sledding for them, to say the least, and it's also been rough sledding for UW-Milwaukee as well. They fall to St. Thomas by a count of 75-71. Now, they do get a cover in this game, and UW-Milwaukee entered into the night 1-5 against the spread, but has not been so rosy there. And if you're looking at the trends of college basketball right now, something that has been very, very rosy for you recently has been home underdogs, as the home dogs, they've been able to do a very solid job going 30-25 against the spread over the last 7 days with a few games for Wednesday pending. And we're starting to see some unders come through as well, unless if your game goes to overtime, like my right pick, but 128 unders, 122 overs as of Wednesday evening. Like I said, a few games still pending. Overall for the season, though, overs have still been hot. 697 overs, 656 unders, and about 10 or so pushes along the way. And overall for the season, we have seen favorites have a little bit of an edge on underdogs, 682, 663, and 16 against the spread. That's a 50.7% hit rate to the favorites. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Wednesday. Coming up next, we're going to be talking with our good friend Major Matt about a few teams that have surprised us far this season. We'll take a look at those Thursday games. We'll get a little bit of a lay of the land in terms of what he's seeing in college basketball, and also a little bit of helpful advice as well with regards to scheduling and handicapping these games, as we've got short slates the next 2 days before a Mondo Saturday, and how he deals with sort of the imbalance of games and sort of planning ahead for Saturday. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the Beeson Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast, and it's always great to be joined by this man as Matt Josephs. You know him better as Major Matt. He does absolutely excellent work taking a look at this great game of college basketball, but really does a little bit of everything. I know he does tremendous work over at Athlon Sports, taking a look at college football when it comes to his player props and his just overall team props in baseball. He has been absolutely superb on that front for the longest of times, and they don't call him Mid-Major Matt for nothing. He does a great job taking a look at all 362 Division I teams in college basketball, and you're able to follow him on Twitter/X over at Mid-Major Matt. And I always encourage you to tune into his show on ESPN Radio in Richmond. He does great work with the show Border to Border. And Matt, always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Always great to be on. This is one of those weeks where we got an interesting set of cards, whether it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday.
Absolutely. And I mean, just in terms of the Thursday card, it's a very small one. We only have 5 games that are up on the Las Vegas betting board. And something that I like to do, and I want to get your thoughts here, is I will be taking a little bit of a look forward do that short slate on Friday and Saturday as I go through Wednesday evening, Thursday morning, try to get a little bit of a jump start. When it comes to college basketball, do you take a little bit of this approach as well when we do get smaller cards and try to plan ahead a little bit more, since unlike a sport like baseball or the NBA, we don't get a lot of back-to-back, so you're able to have sort of metrics that aren't going to move within the next few days.
Yeah, and certainly you want to spend some time also this next couple of weeks to look and see when vacations start for the kids. Obviously, home court advantages change when the students are not there. Now, obviously on December 6th, December 7th, still kids are probably going to be there, but you have to look and see when exams are and things like that. So this is always a good time to kind of figure out when the home court advantages for respective schools continue to go down.
Yep, I think that that's very important as well. And we are going to be starting to get into that period within the next week or two where kids are going to be back home for Christmas break. Heck, I remember when I was in college, I went to a D3 university in the great state of Wisconsin, and this was 10 years ago. But I mean, for my Christmas break, that really started pretty much around Thanksgiving. So I do anticipate kids going back to campus. And does that cause you to have a little bit of variance when it comes to how you evaluate home court advantage? Because I do think that this time of year in mid-December, I think it's the trickiest to gauge because you still have some very lubed up home crowds. You've got some home crowds that are firing all cylinders. Meanwhile, you're going to get some venues within the next week or two that are just completely dead.
Yeah, you certainly want to look at the cities too. Some cities that are college towns, and while the students may not be there, that means the town people will be there. The people who support it, a place like Syracuse where there's not a lot to do other than go to the games and go to the mall and stuff like that. You want to try to kind of see what kind of towns you've got there. If it's in Philadelphia, you're not going to have as much there. So certainly it's stuff that you don't want to necessarily do, but it's important as part of these handicaps to figure out, who's going to be there, who's not going to be there. And do you have a road team who can take advantage of a lesser situation?
I think that that's so well put as well, because there are some college towns that are just absolutely rambunctious where they're hopping all year long. And then you get some major cities where college basketball certainly is not the number one option. It's not the number two option. It might not be the number four option. So always important to be taking a look there. As Matt Josephs, you know him better as Mid-Major Matt, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Matt, I know that there has been a lot of intrigue in terms of some of the teams that you cover out there in the Atlantic 10, and I honestly feel like it hasn't been too bad of a start for the Atlantic 10. For a school that you cover in VCU, it's been very up and down. I know that you do a lot of pre- and post-game hosting for the Richmond Spiders as well. It's been a little bit up and down, but just in terms of the conference itself, what have you made out of the start of the season for an Atlantic 10 that I think many people like myself did anticipate to be a one-bid league?
Yeah, I don't think they've separated themselves yet, but I also don't think they've had too many bad losses that would hurt them as a conference. It's funny because even just today, I got a text from a VCU fan who was very disappointed, and you know how people overreact. And I said, basically, look, with Bairstow being out still and some guys still learning how to kind of fit into this rotation, you've got two good senior guards in Zeb Jackson and Max Shulga, and obviously they have a huge game against Memphis, and we know the Siegel Center can be a tough place to play. They may not win that game, but I kind of like where VCU is right now. They're kind of in a place where, look, we know they're not going to get net large, so get ready for January 3rd when they begin Atlantic 10 play, see if they can do some damage in conference. I'm not ready to say VCU's a failure. When it comes to Richmond, I think the weirdest part of Richmond is I have no idea what to make of Richmond. They've won at home. They've been tremendous. Their offense is explosive at home. Their defense has been pretty good at home, but they also are still not winning as many games on the road or in these neutral court games. Of course, they beat UNLV. They lost a winnable game at Boston College. They lost a winnable game at Wichita State. They play Northern Iowa on Wednesday. They play Florida on a neutral court on Saturday. We know the Spiders don't turn the ball over, but we also know they don't get to the free throw line, and that's really important nowadays, especially with certain officiating crews who call a lot of fouls.
It has been very much a case where we've been seeing a lot of these foul calls, and it has been leading to these totals going higher and higher. And how has that affected your handicap a little bit this year? Because I personally have had to put my totals quite a bit higher than I have in past years. Now, I do feel like things are starting to even out a little bit, and I feel like some of these games have become a little bit less egregious, but I still go back to like the New Mexico versus New Mexico State game where New Mexico State allowed New Mexico to shoot like 29 free throws in the first half and everything like that. And I do feel like the fouls are more rampant this year than ever before, and certainly do need to be taking more precedent in terms of the handicap.
Yeah, and certainly you want to look at the teams that get to the line a lot, and you want to look at their opponents if they foul a lot. So if you've got a team like I'm looking right now, VCU, they're 35th in offensive free throws attempted and field goals per field goals attempted. So VCU drives a lot and tries to get to the free throw line, whereas as we talked about with the Richmond Spiders, they're 359th in that category. They do not get to the free throw line enough, and defensively, they're good at not fouling. So those are the type of teams that if you're looking to go over, you're probably not going to look at the overs as much because the free throw line is so helpful for the over, as the cliche always goes. I mean, you're getting points when there's no the clock movement. So that's something you kind of want to look at, especially if you're looking at overs. If you're looking at unders, you certainly want a team that doesn't get to the free throw line. You can't get those free points.
Yep, I think that that's so well put, and I do think that it is very important in this day and age of college basketball to be looking at free throw shooting a little bit more and looking at foul rates as well. There are some teams like a Virginia, for example, that they do a nice job not taking teams to the foul line. So if you've got a good free throw shooting team going up against Virginia, it's much different than going up against St. Peter's, who's fouling on about 33% of their possession. So I do think that that's so big at taking a look at college basketball. Is joining me on the show. We do have Matt Joseph, better known as Mid-Major Matt, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I do think that that leads to a good point as well, because I was just laying out the foul disparity between Virginia and St. Peter's. And there are people that they always have their algorithms for taking a look at all sorts of sports, whether that be baseball, college basketball, what have you. But how much do you think that there is an importance in just taking a look at the overall matchup? Because I did lay it out in terms of like foul disparity, just teams that have good rebound rates versus bad rebound rates. And I do think that taking a look at the matchup itself still just poses so much great value in terms of taking a look at college basketball rather than just fitting everything into an algorithm, because I don't think that I could anticipate everything that we do see in some of these matchups, which I always use the boxing cliche in college basketball, matchups do make fights.
Yeah, and certainly this is where a good website that you like to use, whether it's KenPom or one of the other sites, they do such a good job of laying out the things, and obviously the colors help, the greens for the goods and the reds for the bads. As you look at it, size and rebounding, that's certainly a thing. You talk about Virginia. Virginia has been bad rebounding, and so certainly when you look at a taller team that has solid point guards, those are going to be the type of teams that might stress Virginia a little bit because of the way they play defense and because of the fact that you're going to get a lot of offensive rebounds. Go back to that Texas A&M game. They had 18 offensive rebounds against Virginia. The problem was once they missed the shots and got the offensive rebounds, they still didn't score the basket. So you certainly want a team that can rebound the ball and then take advantage of it in the end.
Yes, I think that that is so important as well, being able to get those second and third chances. And plus, when a team is able to get an offensive rebound, oftentimes that leads to fouls as well because they're getting the ball down low as well. I always think that that is such a big metric to be taking a look at. And those are some of the teams that I have been feeling a little bit more bullish on this college basketball season. I'm not sure what teams have been surprising you, whether that be to the positive or the negative, but I do feel like there have been some teams that have come to the forefront that are top of mind for me that I've loved, like Arizona's right now rebounding 40% of their misses on offense. They're a team that I've been very stocked up on. Now for Auburn, they take that bad loss to Appalachian State, but I still think that there might be a little bit of upside there. And then a team that I know that you have a little bit of familiarity with, Cincinnati. They're a team that I really love. They do a nice job on the offensive glass, and they've been a pleasant surprise for me thus far this season. There have been a few teams that have been standing out to you in terms of you're now feeling a little bit more bullish on them than you did at the start of the season.
Well, obviously BYU starting out 8-0 is certainly interesting. But, of course, you look at some of the opponents outside of the victory over San Diego State, they're beating teams they're supposed to be. It's the offensive numbers that pop, and, of course, being number one defensively against three-pointers. That's certainly important. We'll learn a little bit more about BYU Saturday when they go to Utah, because after that they got Denver, Georgia State, Bellarmine, Wyoming, and then they start conference play themselves. So BYU is going to have a really good, solid record early on. I think you could kind of look at the Big 12 as a whole, and you look at the KenPom numbers and see all the teams that are in the top 30, and it's going to tell you that this could be a really good season. Of course, it could also tell you that some of these teams haven't really tested themselves. Obviously we knew that Houston was going to be really good this year, and they obviously got victories over Utah and Dayton and Xavier on the road, which is really good. But yeah, the Big 12, of course, I think we kind of looked at it before as one of these conferences. Well, yeah, you got Texas and you got Baylor and you got, some some of these other schools. Of course, Kansas, I can't forget Kansas. But then you got the interesting new ones like Houston and BYU and the good records they're putting up early. Cincinnati, as you just mentioned, is 7-0. So I'll be interested to see how much of this Big 12 stuff kind of changes once we get to conference play and once they start playing each other, because some of those teams with zeros all of a sudden are going to start getting ones and twos.
We have seen a lot of teams in the Big 12 be able to surprise the newcomers in the Big 12. Really have been able to as well. 3 of the newcomers in the Big 12 have yet to lose a game. I thought that they were going to be quite solid. I didn't think that we were quite going to be seeing that. So that's been a little bit of a surprise. And speaking of the Big 12, we do have one of those Big 12 teams that is going to be in action on Thursday, and that would be Iowa State. This is a battle for that great state, as it is Iowa versus Iowa State with a total of 157.5, and Iowa State currently being between about a 7 to a 7.5 point favorite. Without a doubt, this is a big game of the day. It's only a 5-game slate on Thursday, so it's a very small one, but any sort of lean with regards to this Iowa versus Iowa State game?
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously you look the last couple of years, Iowa State has been a snail. Last year they were 328th in pace and then 226th in 2022. And TJ Otzelberger's running a little bit more, just a little bit more. Obviously, the tempo numbers show that they're running a lot more, but there's some of the games where they've kind of been playing that snail's pace before. And if you look at the last couple of Iowa games, you figure, okay, Iowa's got this high-powered offense. They're going to do a lot of things. Last year at Iowa, where Iowa's offense was so good, it was a 75-56 game. 2 years ago, it was a 73-53 game. And, of course, you look at this number, and we see 158, 157.5, 156 out there. Based off the trends, you almost want to look at the under, but you also know that potentially if Iowa gets hot, you know that could certainly be an over. But I'll take my chances that Iowa State's defense continues to play really well. They're 3rd in turnover percentage. Iowa's 5th in not turning the ball over. I'll be interested to see how this thing turns out. But, the under might be in play in this one if you're willing to hope that Iowa goes cold or that Iowa State returns to their snail-like pace.
And I am in total agreement with you here. And how much do you take a look at home and road splits when it comes to college basketball? Because Iowa is one of the kings of this, in my opinion. I just take a look at Iowa over the last 2 years, and in terms of points scored on a per 100 possession basis, each of the last 2 years, they have scored north of 20 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And I think that the fact that this game is in Iowa State is so big, because if this was played in Carver Hawkeye Arena, I do think that there would be a chance that Iowa would be able to get to 75 plus, do their part with this total. But because this game is going to be played at Hilton Coliseum with the Hilton Magic out, that is a big reason why I do lean to the under as well.
And one of the things I like to play for Iowa is their first half team total overs. Here's the difference that helps illustrate your point. They averaged 50.3 points per game at home in the first half. They averaged 33.8 points per game on the road. Now, the difference is their 2 road games so far have been Creighton and Purdue, which are really good opponents. And the home games have been North Florida, Arkansas State, Alabama State, and North Dakota. But it helps your point there to know that they score a lot of points at home and they struggle to do so on the road.
Yep, absolutely. And certainly with Iowa State currently at home, they're allowing 65.2 points per 100 possessions at home. I would take that with a little bit more of a grain of salt, though, as well. When you're playing against Idaho State, when you're playing against UW Green Bay, that's a little bit different than playing against Iowa. But certainly the home and road splits are big in this one. And then we've only got 4 other games on the board for this college basketball Thursday. Anything out of those 4 games that you like, or are you looking more for Friday and Saturday?
Well, it's interesting. I was always predisposed to play the overs in Eastern Kentucky games because when Eastern Kentucky, A.W. Hamilton loves a run. We've seen their paces for a lot of games, and at times their defense has been a little bit of a problem. And you certainly look at like last year when they were 47th in tempo, but their offense was just so bad. And you look at this year's version of Eastern Kentucky, and of course you see Blanton there, and he's been there for the past, and Michael Moreno has been one of those players as well. And once again, when we talk about in KenPom terms, everything is red when it comes to offense. And the key here, and we talked about this earlier with regards to free throws, Eastern Kentucky is shooting 58.2% from the free throw line. That is 358th in the country. So when you're looking at an over and you see a team that doesn't shoot free throws very well, that's certainly not going to help you. Now, with the fact that their defense is so bad, maybe you isolate UNC Greensboro in this situation, who is the home team. The Langleys are going to be really good on offense. Maybe you look at a UNC Greensboro team total over in this situation. They scored 88 against Delaware. They scored 94 against North Carolina A&T. They scored 88 against William Peace, but of course that's a lower level team. I think we could see some pace here, and you might be able to get some value on a UNC Greensboro team total over.
I do think that you can get a little bit of value there. As Mike Jones, you ask who's the coach of UNC Greensboro, and I say Mike Jones has really got this team firing in all cylinders. They're still pretty stout defensively, but that offense with the Langley brothers has really been able to take a little bit of hold as well, and you mentioned it with Eastern Kentucky. They've always been a little bit of a rocket ship in terms of their offense, and Matt, you do absolutely amazing work taking a look at the great game of college basketball. You do nice work when it comes to college football, baseball, we name it, you do it, and I know that you always bring the goods on this podcast. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, so you can certainly check me out on ftmbets.com. I'll be doing a lot of writing for the bowl season, and as much as, in the offseason where we're trying to track all these transfers, tracking the bowl opt-outs and the coaching changes and who's playing and who's not playing, that's a 24/7 job as it is. So certainly getting ready for the bowls coming up next week. As you mentioned, the radio show here in Richmond from 3 until 4, border to border. We do a lot of interviews with players and coaches, getting you ready games involving the schools in the state of Virginia. So yeah, always appreciate you having me on the podcast. Always appreciate all the work that you do as well.
Always appreciate what Matt is able to do, as he does a tremendous job on the player prop front in baseball. Does great work looking at all 362 D1 teams in college basketball. You name it, he does it. FTM Bets, ESPN Radio Richmond. List goes on and on. A big thanks to Matt for joining me on Cusco Soup Now, part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it's a small slate on this college basketball Thursday, but regardless, we get you guys fixed analysis on every game on the betting board. Coming up next as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt, doing an amazing job taking a look at college basketball. If you're out there in the Richmond area, he does great work with his show, Border to Border, over there. And every single time he joins this podcast, I feel like we get a little bit smarter. So a big thanks to Matt for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNN_D1. It is a very small slate today. We've got only 5 games, but we're going to look to make the most out of it, and small slate or big slate, there's money to be made. This is going to be going in order of pretty much time, except for at the bottom you get the smaller conference games. These 2 games involve teams from the Atlantic Sun. Those 2 games, they have 6 digits on the rotation. They're going to be at the bottom. We start with my DK Network write-up pick. This is 875, 876 on the betting board. Iowa, it's road face-off against Iowa State. Iowa State finds themselves as anywhere between 7 and 7.5 point favorites, and total on this game and between 157 and 158.5, and my write-up here is going to be on this total under. I did set my total at a 147, and I think that it's very important to note the home and road splits of Iowa. I was laying it out with our good friend Matt Josephs, and for Iowa, this team over the last 2 seasons, they just have not been the same team when they have been on the road as compared to at home. At home, this team is a rocket ship. They're one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. And then when they hit the road, they're averaging north of 20.5 points fewer per 100 possessions over the last 2 seasons than at home. Right now, this season, they're averaging 20.4 points fewer per 100 possessions in a road/neutral court environment than at home. Last year, that was 21.1 points fewer per 100 possessions. And it adds insult to injury that Iowa State is such a good 2-point shooting defense as well, because with Iowa, they don't take a lot of threes on the road. Only about 29% of their field goal attempts come from 3-point range. That's in the bottom 50 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, they are facing off against an Iowa State team that's 7th in the country in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and it's an Iowa State team that overall number 5 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now they have their home and road splits as well. A lot of this is due to the competition that they played, as Iowa State is currently allowing 65.2 points per 100 possessions at home compared to 100 points per 100 possessions when they're away from home. A lot of this is because Iowa State has been playing the likes of UW Green Bay, Idaho State, teams like this at home. I mean, it's a big giant disparity in terms of the teams that they are playing, but if you look back to last year, there is credence to it, as Iowa State allowed 19.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they were at home rather than on the road, and when they were at home, they generated a turnover on 28.1% 31% of possessions at home compared to 20.9% away from home last season. And Iowa State back to doing an amazing job of generating those turnovers this year. They are third in the country in terms of turnovers forced per offensive play thus far this season. And for Iowa, you have been able to get some production out of some of your versatile players. Ben Krikke, who comes in from Valparaiso, he has been a very nice find for this team. He's been able to log north of 17 points per contest, so I do love what he's been able to bring to the table, but that said, you're going to need a little bit more out of the backcourt in my opinion. For a team that really doesn't turn it over too much, Desante Bowen, though, right now he's your main facilitator for Iowa State with right around about 3.5 assists per contest. To the credit of Iowa, they're only turning the ball over about 9 times per contest. I feel like a lot of that is because they've been playing some lesser competition as well. Even their step-up games against the likes of Purdue and Creighton, those are not teams that really take away the ball when you're playing against Alabama State, North Dakota, what have you. It's very easy to be able to take care of the ball. I do like what Tony Perkins brings to the table. 13 points per game for an Iowa team that overall shoots 35.5% from three, but right around 39% from distance at home, closer to 31% on the road. And then for Iowa State, how about what Tamin Lipsby has been able to do with 15 points, 6.5 boards, 6.5 assists. It's really been able to up his game and 3 steals per contest as well. Iowa State, they themselves are currently a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but what I actually think is going to keep this Hawkeyes team in the game is that they've actually done a solid job of being able to guard the three-point arc. While Iowa is 202nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are a top 100 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, allowing opponents to only shoot about 29.7% from three-point range away from home. That is 62nd in the nation, and I do think that that's going to keep Iowa in this game. This is an Iowa State team that they're relatively okay on the glass, but they're not a team that's going to be just absolutely ripping teams apart down low, as Tamin Lipsby is right now your top rebounder. And when it comes to Iowa State, I do like what they've been able to get out of the freshman and Milan Mimosavljevic. He's been able to do a nice job with 13.5 points, shooting 44.5% from three-point range, as we actually thought that it was going to be Omaha Blue who was going to be able to ascend. He's only been able to give the team about 3.5 points per contest, but this is a spot where I did set my number at 7. I do think that Iowa State going to be able to do a very supreme job with their defense, but I do think that for Iowa State, a team that has been a little bit suspect with their offense over the last few seasons, it's going to be a little bit tough for them to be able to get some scoring going as well. So at north of 7, I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Hawkeyes, and my DK Network right to pick is on the under. I set my total at 147, so I do think that this is going to be very much a defense-oriented game. So looking at the under with my write-up, and going to be taking a look at anything north of 7 with the Hawkeyes. 877, 878 on the betting board. It is Portland, and they do hit the road to face off against North Dakota State. The Bison find themselves as 2.5-point favorites. Your total on this game is anywhere between 150 and 151.5 with North Dakota State. I did set them as a favorite of 2.5 points, so we're in a little bit of wait-and-see mode in terms of this one. I was seeing a 1.5 out there a little bit earlier, and if we can get back to that 1.5, I'd be willing to lay it with North Dakota State. North Dakota State, with this coaching regime, they are notorious for trying out different things when it comes to non-conference play, sort of mixing and matching, and I do think that they need a little bit more down low. They've got a 6'10" big man in Andrew Morgan, who's right now only giving you about 4.5 rebounds per game. I was anticipating a little bit more out of him. Now, the good news for North Dakota State is that it feels like the backcourt is coming along for the ride. You've got a pair of guys in Bowden Skunberg along with Damari Wheeler-Thompson, who's been able to combine for about 29 points per game with Wheeler-Thomas. He's been able to shoot about 37% from three-point range, logging about 3.5 assists per game for a team that only turns it over 10.5 times per game. Now, North Dakota, a little bit more of a slow and controlled team for the Bison. They're in the bottom 100 in terms of total possessions per game. Portland, top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game, and I do like what Portland has in terms of versatility from Tyler Robertson. 17 points, 5 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, but what is off-putting about this Portland team, they do turn the ball over 15.5 times per game. Good news for them, they go up against a North Dakota State team that has never really been a good team at being able to generate turnovers in terms of steals on a per-possession basis, and see them year in and year out. They're in the bottom 50 in all of college basketball, but what's also encouraging for this North Dakota State team, Tate Jarvis Miller has been able to come to the forefront for this team. He's been able to be the top rebounder with about 6 boards per game. He's actually been able to give you at least 6 rebounds in each out of the last 4 contests, and I think that that's just very big for this team in general because they are going up against a Portland team that has a little bit of versatility but not a ton of size. Tyler Harris has been able to give you about 9 rebounds per game. You get back into the full Chris Austin, who was a starter 2 seasons ago for Portland, missed all of last year due to injury, and looks like he's getting back to his old form. He's been able to put up 15-plus points in 3 out of the team's last 4 games, but still shooting just 27% from 3 when he was a starter 2 years ago, was logging about 14.5 points per game. But I do think that the ultimate undoing for Portland is going to be those turnovers, and I do think that North Dakota State going to be able to play a little bit more slowly, a little bit more controlled as well. This is a North Dakota State team that in their last 3 games against Division I competition, they have scored 71 points or fewer in regulation in all of them. And for Portland, they have been wobbly with their offense, to say the least, as well. The defense has been quite ghastly, but I do think that North Dakota State is going to be able to slow this game down a little bit, and I think that both of these teams relatively even up on the glass. I do lean a little bit to the home team here with North Dakota State. If I'm able to get 2 or less, going to be willing to lay it with them, and did somebody total 146.5, so dive it under, and at 2 or less, willing to lay it with the Bison. This last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit our 2 extra games, 879, 880 on the betting board. Eastern Illinois plays us IUPUI. IUPUI 4.5 to a 5.5 point underdog. Your total between 130.5 and 131.5. I said Eastern Illinois is a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with IUPUI. It's just hard to find anything that this team is doing right. They're shooting 24.5% from 3 with 14.5 turnovers per game. They're doing a little bit of a better job of generating turnovers, but you only have one player averaging north of 4.2 rebounds per game, as Jalen Counter has had to do it all for this team. Jalen Counter for IUPUI, give him credit. He's trying 16 points, 4.8 boards, 2.5 assists, currently shooting 47.5% from 3-point range. There's not a single other guy on this roster that's made at least 1 3 that's shooting above 33% from 3. And you've got 2 guys on the roster that have hit a 3 that are hitting above 20.5% from 3-point range. As last year, Vincent Brady, he was a nice 3-point shooter at 35% from 3 with 11 points per game. This year, 6.5 points per contest, shooting 20.5% from 3-point range. That's been off-putting. You do have someone in Bryce Monroe who's been able to give you about 11 points per game. He's shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, so he's been able to do a little bit of something for this team. And for Eastern Illinois, it's not like this offense by any stretch of the imagination has been amazing against D1 competition. They have scored 64 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games, but the defense has come to play as well. They were able to hang in there on the road against Kansas. That was a 1-possession game with about 5 minutes remaining. I'm not saying that this Eastern Illinois team is going to be some sort of an incredible force or anything like that, and they did catch Kansas napping, but I'm liking what I'm seeing out of someone like a Cooper Jacoby, who's been able to give you 12 points, 7.5 boards. He's got versatility, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Eastern Illinois, at the very least, is taking care of the ball with about 11 turnovers per game. You've got a big man that comes in from Illinois, and Jermaine Hamlin, who's 6'10". He's able to give you about 4 rebounds per game, and then you've been able to get a little bit more in the backcourt out of Tiger Booker, someone who began the season banged up, just returned in the last 2 games, and in the last 2 games that he has played, he's had a combined 31 points, 8 assists, 0 turnovers. This is someone that began his career over at Tarleton State, so he's been able to make a nice little bit of an impact. Eastern Illinois actually has guys firing all cylinders. This is a pretty poop-tastic matchup, but at the very least, Eastern Illinois is showing you a pulse. Meanwhile, IUPUI is just back to being IUPUI, and both of these teams play at a very slow pace. Both of these teams are getting nothing going on offense. Recognize that this IUPUI defense is one of the most putrid. They're putting the PU in IUPUI in terms of defense, but that said, semi-total 128. Not sure if either team is going to be able to get to 65 here. Going to be taking a look at the under end with the Eastern Illinois. One to lay up to 5.5 with them. Now we get our 2 extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306, 569, 306, 570. UNC Greensboro plays us at Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky, a 9 to a 9.5 point underdog with your total 145.5. Did somebody total 143.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under. We got an Eastern Kentucky team that we were talking about a little bit with Mid-Major Matt, that they are looking to play quite a bit up-tempo, but you've got a UNC Greensboro team that does a really nice job with their defense. We saw UNC Greensboro be able to go on the road, get a massive win against Arkansas a few weeks ago, and for UNC Greensboro, this team just gets up in you with regards to the defensive side of things as well, which is what I truly love. You've got Mike Jones, you were going to ask who, and I'd say Mike Jones coaching up this team, and in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this is a team that traditionally they're more in that top 100. Right now they're about 190th, but I do anticipate a little bit of a rebound, as if you take a look at their last 3 games, they've been giving up about 97 points per 100 possessions. They had to play against some very stiff competition, and you do have the Langley brothers in the backcourt. Keyshawn Langley is more of your primary scorer. Meanwhile, Kobe Langley, he's a guy that just does those little grody things. He does the things that just really elevate this team in general, to be able to elevate them, as Kobe Langley, right around 8 points, 6.5 assists, 3.5 rebounds per game, and then Keyshawn Langley, he's more of that go-to scorer that's been able to log about 13.5 points per contest. He also chips in there about 1.7 steals per game, as it's actually been Mikel Brown-Jones, who comes over from VCU, who's been your primary scorer. Currently only shooting 62.5% from three-point range. Certainly do see a fall-off coming there, but 15-plus points, 7-plus boards in each of the last 4 games. Have been highly impressed by that. Meanwhile, you've got an Eastern Kentucky team that I think should be able to hold in there because they've got the best rebounder in this game at Isaiah Cozart, who's been able to give you 10-plus rebounds per game. You've got Devontae Blanton along with Michael Moreno, a pair of guys that have size and shot in the mid-30s from three-point range a season ago. Both guys are giving you between 6 and 6.5 rebounds per game. And Blanton is picking up right where he left off from a scoring perspective last season with about 16.5 points per game. Moreno, more around 7.5 points per game. And something that I've been noticing with this Eastern Kentucky team is that it feels like they've slowed down a little bit with their tempo. They're still a pretty fast team at about 50th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but typically I'm used to them playing just a little bit faster. Meanwhile, UNC Greensboro, they're back to that slow, grody style, 272nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It is an Eastern Kentucky team that gets a little bit loose with the ball, 13 turnovers per game for Greensboro. They generate about 7 steals per game, with which their tempo, that's pretty solid. And for Greensboro, as I was alluding to, the defense seems to be coming back for them. 64 points or fewer surrendered in 3 out of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, you've got an Eastern Kentucky team that has been held to fewer than 70 points in 2 out of their last 3 games. So I do think that the defense going to be able to step up for Greensboro. I did set them as just a 7.5 point favorite, so getting north of 9, I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Eastern Kentucky team that I think can win the battle on glass. So going to be diving in on the under as I set my total at a 143.5 and taking those points with Eastern Kentucky, and wrap things up with 306-571, 306-572. Central Arkansas is going to be playing us to Little Rock. Little Rock finds themselves as a road favorite of anywhere between 6.5 and 7 points. Your total on this game is anywhere between 157.5 and 159. I do feel like Little Rock should be a favorite, but I think that we've gone a tad bit too far. This is an interstate rivalry, and I did set my number at 4, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Central Arkansas. I like what I've seen out of Elias Cato, who's been able to do a solid job as a versatile player. 12.5 points, 6.5 boards, a steal, a block per contest on 37.5% three-point shooting as a 6'9", nice, solid combo player. Now, for Central Arkansas, they are dealing with quite a few injuries. We saw Cato out of the fold against Hawaii. It's sounding like he should be able to come back in this game, but I am going to be monitoring that situation. As for Central Arkansas in general, this has been a team that has dealt with all sorts of ailments. As to begin the season, you were expecting this to be the Cameron Hunter show. He has yet to play this far this season after he was the team's top scorer from a season ago, but you know that Ogambasi Itam is going to be in the fold. He, in their last game against Hawaii, was able to give you 12 points, and overall for the season, he's been able to do a nice job pulling in there right around 8 rebounds per game, and he's going to be one of the best players on the glass in this game. You've got a Little Rock team that's full of transfers, as Kalen Robinson, who began his career out in the SEC over at Arkansas and Texas A&M, has come in and has given the team 19 points per game, but you've got your injury concerns with him as well. He has not played since Thanksgiving, so both of these teams come in with some of their top scorers a little bit wounded. Now, you've been able to have D'Antoni Gordon be a mainstay for this Arkansas Little Rock team. He's been able to do a nice job putting in there about 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, a block, a steal per contest at 6'8". Has a little bit of versatility to be able to pop threes. So Little Rock as a whole, they're only shooting about 30.5% from three-point range. With Little Rock, they've done a better job taking care of the ball, only about 11 turnovers per game, but you are looking at a pair of teams that are just relatively ghastly with their defense. Central Arkansas, typically a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. They've been a little bit more mid-tempo this year with all of the injuries that they have taken. Currently, they're clocking in 342nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Little Rock more in that neighborhood, about 240th. So both of these teams have been rough with that regard, but I do think a guy that can be able to elevate this team and be able to help this Central Arkansas team hold in there is E.B. Klintman. Klintman last season was able to give you about 4.5 points. He's been a little bit of a facilitator for the team and has been seeing more and more minutes as the injuries pile up. He's someone that at 6'9" is able to play a little bit of positionless basketball, and then on top of that, you've been seeing a little bit more recently out of Messiah Oluworke, who he had a little bit of a rough start to the season after last year, logged about 8 points, 5.5 boards, steal per contest. He's now been able to give the team 7+ points in each of their last 4 games and has been able to give the team a combined 5 steals in that time span as well. So you got a pair of teams that are rough with regards to their defense. You got a pair of teams that just at their core, they play a little bit more up-tempo. We've got a total between 157.5 and 159 now because of the injuries on both sides. I do lean a little bit more towards the under of 159, not having Robinson out there for Little Rock, not having out there Hunter, coupled with now having the injury to Elias Cato for Central Arkansas. That does make things advantageous for the under, but with Tucker Anderson, what he's been able to do as a true freshman for Central Arkansas, being able to put in there 13+ points in each of the last 4 games, I think it keeps Central Arkansas lively in this game. So taking the points with Central Arkansas and at north of a 158, diving in on the under, and that will wrap things up for the Thursday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And big thanks to Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt, for joining me in the last segment. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.